couple of months ago, one of our good local members, Mike Russ, made me aware of your next two speakers and the rather incredible story that they have to tell. The way he learned about Harry Hubbard and Paul Shafranky is he picked up a copy of this magazine called Ancient American off of one of the out of one of the bookstores, of which this whole magazine is devoted to this subject, called, on the cover it says Ancient Gold in Illinois. And the sum and substance was, what he told me that caught my attention was, did you know that Alexander the Great's tomb has been found in Illinois, southern Illinois? And of course I didn't at that time. And I presume that maybe a majority of you had not heard that until this time. There is so much about this whole subject that we're happy to have them here tonight to talk about this, plus the other things that they do in the archaeological field and their areas. Some of our people went out there a month or two ago and helped do some more digging and things out there in the muck and mire of whenever it rains. But if you're familiar with the area, and I am vaguely familiar with it because I used to live in a little farther north in Illinois, a couple of 100 miles, down in the vicinity of Flora, Illinois, and some other, and I know we have a lady here from Taylorville and other Illinois people. Anyway, I think you're going to find it fascinating, interesting, of these priceless artifacts that have been found in a most unusual place. The first speaker you hear will be, as you've seen on your program, Harry Hubbard. Welcome, Harry, from, let's see, your town is?
Melbourne, Florida.
Melville?
Melbourne, Florida.
Oh, he's from Melbourne, Florida. Okay. That's why he has to drive up there to do his digging. But welcome, Harry Hubbard, tonight. I think you're going to find it most fascinating.
Thank you. And first, I think it's appropriate to thank Dean, his lovely wife Phyllis, who coordinated with us over the phone. And I'd like to also recognize this gentleman back here, Mr. Mike Russ. Mike, would you please stand up? This guy has helped out on this Congress. He's helped us out tremendously, and he deserves a round of applause. He has helped us. He's definitely shared a major portion of the load. And I also would like to introduce my colleague, Paul Shafranky, who will be speaking with you after I speak to you here for a minute. And basically how we met is I'm a collector. I'm a collector of maps, and that's how basically Paul and I met. And the fact that he was manager of the place that was framing the maps, he noticed all the Latin on these maps, and he's a natural for Latin, and he's the world's greatest epigrapher. He knows several different ancient languages, and he speaks probably about 6 languages fluently. So we are a traveling museum, and we're going to explain how we got here to Global and some of the other research. And we kind of didn't want to just elaborate entirely on the fact that we found Alexander the Great's tomb in southern Illinois, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But in our travels, we have brought here with us pretty much a small museum, and we wanted to show you some of the things that we had and elaborate on them and kind of divert a little bit away from the typical norm. And first thing I want to show you is here we have, if we can put it up on the screen now, the first map. It's the oldest map in the world. It's the other one there. It's the oldest map in the world of the continent Atlantis. This is the only one in the Western Hemisphere. To date that we know of, there are only 4 of these extant in the world. The Vatican, of course, has one. And I think there's one in the Louvre. And we have 4 original Atlantis cultures in our collection, which is more than anyone except the Vatican that I know of. A couple of things about this peculiar map concerning Atlantis. It was printed in 1665 by a Catholic Jesuit priest named Athanasius Kircher. And this particular map is featured in several different books concerning Atlantis, probably over 100. And funny thing is, they all show the map of Atlantis. What you'll notice, if you look close enough, is that the map is actually upside down. North is at the bottom, and here we have Hispaniola, which is called Spain, Africa, and America's on the other side. And if you look to the center here, you will see a mountain range depicted. And it's an odd thing that so many of these books that print about Atlantis, they never give what the Latin inscription says on all the pages surrounding the map. And what it describes, what Athanasius Kircher describes in the mid-17th century, is that along this mountain range, the Atlanteans had a machine that was able to bore through the mountain, and that they would just drive their little machine through the mountain in a honeycomb fashion, and that along with these holes that they were able to make travel ways, and evidently they were mining something. And then it goes on to describe that there was a mild earthquake, and the mountain just kind of collapsed after the mild earthquake, and then the whole island just kind of folded in on top of itself. And then it describes also the war between the gods, Egyptian gods and the old Akkadian gods of various descriptions, kind of along the lines of what you would hear concerning Mr. Robert Morningsky's depictions of ancient Egyptian history. And for some reason, the books don't ever mention this. The war with the celestial gods was over, and there was no one that really cared about the collapsing of Atlantis, because they had already mined all the minerals that they had desired to. And this is where you get a lot of the movies that concern the old boring machines through the mountains and this and that. And somehow the information got lost around the turn of the 17th, at the end of the 17th, beginning of the 18th century, and it seems to have been lost, or more rightfully perhaps suppressed. I personally would have never known about it if we hadn't had the actual information printed over 300 years ago and being able to show it to you. A couple of other odd things concerning Atlantis is several of the books concerning about Atlantis only say what Plato wrote about Atlantis. And they'll say that this is the only description that they have of Atlantis. But in essence, we have Diodorus Siculus writes about Atlantis extensively. Pliny the Elder. There's Strabo writes about Atlantis around 6 BC or so. So there are several different ancient classical authors that write about this ancient continent of Atlantis. Now, what we're going to do now is I want to elaborate on one of the previous speakers' information. The EBS, the enlightened barbarian scientist, Mr. Philip Sparks, who had spoken about the hollow earth and various connections concerning that. And with these maps and these old prints, I was able to go back into history and find where the actual theory of the solid core came from. And this is one of the original Athanasius Kircher prints that describes the system of fire underground. All of these come from a book printed in 1665, as I had stated earlier, called Mundus Subterraneus, which is the subterranean world, so to speak. And basically what he describes here is, in Latin, is the fact that there is a large ball of fire in the center of the planet that burns and then pushes the molten rock and the lava up to the top of the volcanoes, and then it spreads down, flies down, and then creates mountains and canyons and whatnot. And it goes on like that. And these are the first maps that describe anything concerning the actual core of the earth. There is nothing before this printed in world history that describes that. And we have this on display back here, but this is just one of the maps that were in the book, and it's quite explicit that there are other small balls of fire that will assist the primary ball of fire to help the rock become molten and pushed to the outer edges of the planet. And at the same time, he had his own theory concerning the aqueous, or the water that comes from the earth. And here he describes how there is a large body of water in the center of the earth, the heat from the heat of the water is pushed out to the tops of the mountains, and the streams and rivers flow down back into the oceans, and then the oceans will flow back into the underworld, where the cycle just continues to perpetuate itself. And the Catholic Church, the Pope, concurred with all this. Like I say, he was a Jesuit scholar, and he was quite brilliant. He spoke many languages. He had lowered himself down into a volcano a couple of times. He almost got fried several times. And he was brilliant, but what got me is, how did he figure that both of these could have happened at the same time? I don't know. And as all of his brilliance, I guess there was a big problem with that I had. And going on a little further, we want to show now the secondary map, the secondary phone. That you get a little bit bigger on this. Here we have an original map of Matthias Quadus, who was a map maker from the school of Gerhardus Mercator. He wrote several diaries and atlases of maps. He was banned for 8 years by the church. He was printed out of, he lived in Cologne, Germany. And this is one of the maps that he did, and it concurs with several of the other Gerhardus Mercator maps. And he describes a little bit more detail concerning the North Polar region. And what you'll notice is, in the center of the map, there are 4 islands. These are called the Bargos Islands, and they're written all the way back 2,000 years ago by Pliny. He refers to them. There are other ancient authors that refer to it perhaps as the land of Thule, the land of the north, Hyperborea, various names. But in this, he describes around here, there's script on the back, and there's script all over the front of the map. And I'm going to just read briefly what some of these say. The first section over here to the upper left reads, 4 channels make up the island, and they produce 19 mouths or openings to the outer ocean. The rivers flow to the north and empty into the inner earth. The canyon which lies beneath the whole is approximately 33 leagues wide. That's about 99 modern miles, give or take a few. And you can see where he's talking about that there are 19 miles into the outer ocean. The second portion, up to the upper right, says, in this part of the north exist the Bargo Islands, according to M. Paul Vanetti, Book 2, Chapter 61. These islands always rotate around the North Pole, and the compass needles always point to the south. This channel has 5 openings, and because the speed of the flow, it never freezes. That's in this section here. The third section, along the lower left-hand corner, reads, this island is the best and healthiest of the entire north. This channel is composed of 3 openings, which are frozen approximately 3 months out of the year. Its width is 37 leagues, which is 111 modern miles. And the other island here says, here live pygmies, which are 4 feet tall and are called Skrælingers in Greenland. The map goes on to indicate, or to describe, how the months, the cycles of the year, how there are 6 months of darkness, 6 months of light, and it was obvious that these people had been here on many different occasions. It describes how you use the polarity of this line here, and how to set your compass, set your sextants, in order to get up the rivers. It tells you where to actually stop and pick up supplies, where to pick up driftwood, what kind of oils to take, what type of provisions to pack to actually get there. And it also describes the dark canyon in the center. So we thought that this was something that you might interest. It kind of goes hand in hand with the research of Mr. Philip Sparks. We're ready to go. let's get up there. And we have these maps and several others featured in what we did a video 3 or 4 years ago now, called the map video. It goes through several of the maps in our collection and pointing out several different anomalies that just seem to have been washed up or just hidden from history for some reason. And we have that available back here. We figured that people might be interested in it, and when we saw on the itinerary that there were people speaking on the hollow earth theory, we kind of stumbled in it by accident, just because these old maps tell you how to get there. So we didn't make any of it up. It just seems to have happened. I also collect coins, currencies, and books. And I joined some underground or undercover, whatever you want to call them, off-the-wall book clubs. And one of the books I purchased was The Mystery Cave of Many Faces, written by Russell Burroughs and Fred Reedholm. And in this book, it describes how a guy found an ancient tomb or a cave that had these ancient crypts in it. There were 12 lesser crypts, one main crypt, and he goes on to describe how in the main crypt there was a gold coffin. And one of the 12 lesser crypts had a woman in it. Well, on as time proceeded, we looked at it, and Paul had looked at it, and he made some decipherments, and pretty much it indicates that the king, Alexander the Great, including the entire Ptolemaic dynasty, is buried in this crypt. And we have been hampered now for 3 years to get there. We're like 2 years behind on this project, simply because we found out that this gentleman who found, he's not a gentleman, he's really a rat, his name is Russell Burroughs. He's just recently moved to Fort Collins, Colorado. And we have his address and phone number on our website, and he really loves us for that. He's pulled guns on me, he's threatened to kill me and Paul, and it's really been a nightmare for the last 3 years. And what happened was he'd stolen several $1 million worth of gold, and he'd melted it down, and he'd looted literally thousands and thousands of artifacts, precious, artifacts that are extremely important for our world's history, and sold them off without ever telling the landowner and without ever taking anyone there, just making up lies. There have been many brilliant scholars that have gone before us and made brilliant deductions with the limited information that they had concerning this that almost nailed it. Paul was the first one to make accurate decipherments of the inscriptions, and other scholars had gotten a couple of words right here and there, but they never could put it together. They never could really figure out what had happened. We've been featured in several newspaper articles. The Ancient American, this entire magazine is dedicated to our research, and we have these available. Like he said, it's a back issue from March of this year. And it goes on to describe, it has several different decipherments in it. And between the book and the magazine, you get a real good view of what has happened and how we got involved in all this. And just recently, we have been contacted by Vanity Fair, and he said that the top reporter for Vanity Fair said that they wanted to do a feature magazine as well. So that could possibly happen later this year. But why does that bring us to global? Well, what happened is a quirk of nature or ancient history. There are about 20 tablets from this tomb that clearly indicate alien presence. Has pictures of aliens. One stone out of marble has what appears to be 3 or 4 grays singing or making noises of some sort. There are ships. There are reptilians, grays, other types of atmospheric suits with women in atmospheric suits holding the Ankh and scepter. We have several photographs here that you can see. And several stones that actually, in the inscription, describe what we would call today UFOs flying across the sky. And such a decipherment is featured in our Tomb Tape 4. We've made a series of tapes, probably 10 or 12 tapes concerning all this. And the best one, we call the tablet the Red Basket. It's featured on Tube Tape 4, and it's quite enlightening. Like I said, we didn't make it up. And the photo show video, which is also available, features several different alien-type tablets that are indicated. And we didn't make it up. And it wasn't strange to us that aliens were depicted on these rocks that are 2,000 years old. And there are several classical writers. Pliny the Elder, this is available from the Harvard University. He describes several different scenarios where he describes phenomena, or what they call in ancient times portents. And I'd like to read a couple of them for you here, just to give you some idea. This is taken from Book 2 of Pliny, in chapter 22. The tub star presents the shape of a cask, with a smoky light all around it. The horn star has the shape of a horn, like the one that appeared when Greece fought the decisive battle of Salamis. The torch star resembles glowing torches. The horse star, horses' manes, in very rapid motion and revolving in a circle. There also occurs a shining comet, whose silvery tresses or tassels glow so brightly that it is scarcely possible to look at it, and which displays within it a shape in the likeness of a man's countenance. So what I interpret out of that is Pliny's actually looking into some kind of window. He gives some more first-hand accounts, continuing on. Stars also come into existence at sea and on land. I have seen a radiance of a star-like appearance clinging to javelins of the soldiers on sentry duty at night in front of the rampart. And on a voyage, stars alight on the yards and other parts of the ship with a sound resembling a voice, which could be a hum, hopping from perch to perch in the manner of birds. These, when they come singly, are disastrously heavy and wreck ships, and if they fall into the hold, burn them. So here he's describing something that a light comes with a hum and zaps the boat and sinks the boat, which I think is pretty peculiar. And this is all written probably about 30-40 BC, AD. Continuing on, Book 2, chapter 57, we are told that during the wars with the Cimbri, a noise of clanging armor and the sounding of a trumpet were heard from the sky, and that the same thing has happened frequently, both before then and later. In the third consulship of Marius, the inhabitants of Ameria and Tudor saw the spectacle of heavenly armies advancing from the east and the west to meet in battle, those from the west being routed. It has often been seen, and is not at all surprising, that the sky itself catches fire when the clouds have been set on fire by an exceptionally large flame. Other ancient writers record portents, omens. There are others in Pliny, Diodorus Siculus, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, Herodotus, and also Livy gives some really good descriptions of ancient portents, which we would call today UFOs. A lot of these are not mentioned in many of the books of today, and I've heard that other people have done research on this and that, but they seem to not mention the Pliny and how explicit some of these are and how they describe something. You know, how would we describe a car 2,000 years ago? We would use archaic words that somehow, some way, would just make sense to us at the time because we didn't have other words to describe them. When we came here and we were deciding what to do for a workshop, we chose to keep it simple and attempt to give the participants or our attendees something that they could directly hold on to and understand in a historical sense, and something that they could carry with them, and that it wouldn't be so complicated, but something also fun to learn. In our workshop, we're going to explain how the research that we did got us to Alexander's tomb. Just by step-by-step approach and how we approach ancient history and how we combine contemporary history with it. And we're going to describe things that make all of this possible and make sense to us. We've been very happy to see that there are so many open-minded people here, and that it's not so much as a hardcore crowd of scholars which we've given speeches to, but we've found that you guys are far more brilliant than the professors and the doctors and the people who claim to be supremely educated. In our workshop, we're going to show how fraud and deception has changed a big portion of our history over the last 2,500 years up to today, and how something or someone has not only manipulated history, but created warps in the sequence of events in our timeline, which is basically what we found with all this. We found a warp in the timeline, something that has been lost in history, something that has been kind of discreetly overlooked. And we will also introduce to the attendees for the first time here in Denver, we're going to expose the greatest and most elaborate hoax of this century concerning history, decipherment, ancient documents. And we would look forward to seeing you in a workshop. It's going to be really thrilling. And like I say, it's going to be something that's going to shock you and take your emotions one way than the next. And I hope actually end up making you laugh and roll on the floor at how so many people have been misled concerning this enigma that seems to be present in modern day. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Paul, and he's going to talk a little bit more about this tomb and different aspects concerning it. And because it's really been old hat for us. We've been, like I said, been involved with this for 3 years, and it's been a nightmare. It's been a great nightmare. So Paul Shafranca.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing? Well, it's been a nightmare. Now it feels good to be here with everybody, because I've never met so many open-minded people before. I actually feel like I'm talking to people at a level that they can understand, which is very difficult. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. Well, Harry and I have gotten into a lot of trouble with the research we've been doing. We got ourselves into a lot of trouble. We actually stumbled on all this by accident, as he explained with the book in the cave, and it's been really aggravating. But what I would like to elaborate mostly is my journey, my personal journey to where we got right now. I've lived through many countries throughout the world. My mother's Austrian, my father was American military, so I got to travel all over the world, especially in Europe. I lived in Europe in many states here in the United States, and got to learn many languages. By the time I was 3 years old, I spoke 3 languages fluently, which was Spanish, German, and English. I had no choice because I was thrown into a Spanish kindergarten and had no choice but to learn the language very quickly to survive. So it started that way. My grandfather, Franz Schafranke, in Austria, was also a linguist. He studied ancient languages, and he was a music professor. And he told me at a very young age, if you want to know everything you need to know about the world, any information to protect yourself, you need to study the ancient languages. He said, if you study the ancient languages, there's nobody that can deceive you. I was 7 years old at that time. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I would have had to learn the hard way to understand what was going on. It began when I went to a high school in Austria at the age of 14. It was the monastery of Stift Lambach. It was a Benedictine monastery in central Upper Austria. There was a school and a monastery next to it. The school was pretty much secular, but we were allowed to board at the monastery. This is where I started to do some of my research. I learned Latin and Greek. And the monastery was built in the 1200s. And it was very peculiar the way the priesthood was acting, because they acted to me like a secret society. And later on, I did find out that there were members of the old Knights Templars and a branch of the Thule Society. That monastery during the Second World War was a castle for the SS and the Knights Templars. It was also the school where Adolf Hitler went to as a small child. But I was privileged to go into the old libraries, and I was able to look at some very, very ancient books that date to like 500 AD. Worm-ridden, dusty, but I noticed a lot of the writing in there was just absolutely fascinating. It was so archaic, the Latin was archaic, it was all handwritten documents. And I said to myself, I would love to know what all this says. But I hadn't really gotten the chance to investigate everything at that time because I had my schoolwork to do. Well, coming back to the United States, I finished my senior year up in Dover, New Hampshire. Normal, was going for an electrical engineering degree, went to the University of New Hampshire and studied electrical engineering and picked up Russian. Also had an interest in Egyptian. I always was interested in history. I studied military history intensely, and I loved the subject. I started studying World War II, World War I, going far back. Ancient history, ancient military history in particular. The battles and the clashing of the swords just fascinated me. When I was studying all that, I started to notice some peculiarities. There were versions. When I was younger, I noticed I was taught one version from one textbook, but then as the years went on, it seemed like things started to change. And I kind of questioned that. I said, wait a minute, I remember reading something when I was 8 years old that's completely different than that. I said, well, maybe I'm going crazy, I'm forgetting of something. But I noticed a peculiar change. And also noticed that in United States history, what was taught 20 years ago versus to what is taught now. And I started getting very, very suspicious. But while I was in college, I joined the Army. I went into the Reserve Corps. And the Army very graciously, because of my knowledge of language, decided to give me a scholarship. And they said, we want you to work in Army intelligence. I said, fine. I went through their program, and I noticed that they were trying to program me to do what they wanted. But I was a very free individual person at that time. I questioned everything, and I thought that was my duty to question and get correct answers. Well, apparently it wasn't. Because as soon as I started questioning a few things, what was supposedly politically correct, and I started correcting my superiors on a few things, that's when they turned on me real badly and said, well, you're not going into military intelligence, you're going into infantry. At that point, I said, well, the hell with you guys. You broke the contract, bye-bye. So I left. I worked in several places. I worked in an electronics company, Sprague Electric Company, because I still was pursuing electrical engineering. But at the same time, I was continuing my study of ancient languages. Particularly, I improved on my Latin and the Greek, and I became very fascinated with Hebrew, because I knew Latin and Hebrew were two intellectual languages in the Middle Ages. And as I started realizing and reading more about secret societies, I realized, well, if anything secret would be recorded that I needed to know, it would have to be in Latin or Hebrew. And I was right about that. After I left, I decided to just not pursue anything in particular. I did a lot of traveling. I traveled back and forth to Europe. I spent some time in North Africa. I went to Egypt, just to see the places I've read about earlier. And it was nice to be able to go to the temples and read the hieroglyphs. But I really had no plans about anything, really, in my life. It was just in the late 80s, in 1988, that I started to acquire some more knowledge and meet some more people about possibly a conspiracy going on. And that drew me to reading some more Hebrew and Latin. And it seemed like there was definitely something going on, but I still didn't understand much about it. So I decided, well, I'm just going to continue on my life, just going to study what I want to study. I'm not going to let money or anything worry me at all. So I decided to become a professional gambler. I'm a very good poker player and a casino blackjack player, and I was content for a while, you know, making a living that way, which I did for almost 2 years with some friends traveling around the country. And then I took a break in Melbourne, Florida in '92, and I also love to preserve art, which I worked in a frame shop and I managed for a while. And then everything seemed to be fine. Then came Harry Hubbard along. He had to bring this map for me to frame. At that time, I was like, oh. I looked at it, I said, well, that's an interesting old map. I'm sure you know what it says. And he said, no, I don't know what it says. I said, well, let me translate it for you. And you can read it all in Tomb Tape 4. That was like one of our first videos. I got to know Harry very, very well. I was so impressed with the library and the knowledge that he had gained that was in there. He had books on old languages, books dating back to the early 1700s, and information that he had. Before that, I've gathered little bits and pieces, and I suspected that there was a conspiracy theory going on. But when I met Harry, it was right there in front of me. A lot of things that I've suspected throughout my whole life, he laid right in front of me with old books. And then I decided, well, we have a mission. Because there were times before that I was near death, and I didn't die. And it seemed like I was just stumbling into things coincidentally. This map, meeting Harry, and then after this we did the map video. He was also a collector of ancient coins. We did some studies on that, currency collection, and we found out a lot of things that kind of ties up to this whole conspiracy theory that's going on, and we will be showing you this in detail at the workshop that you can see for yourself. It went on until Harry also had to show me that book, The Mystery Cave of Many Faces. It just never ends. And looking through that, I discovered, well, I always wanted to know about ancient America. What happened here? I never bought that Columbus was first here. I knew a lot about the Vikings, but I said, wait a minute. These people in ancient times had large ships. There was transoceanic travel. There has to be some evidence here. So we started to look. He had an album with mounds, of the edible mounds that he went into, and we started taking some measurements and looking at it, and I said, well, it's definitely not Native American. There was somebody else that had done that. And we started studying, and they said, well, we need to find some more information or artifacts in the United States. I said, boy, I wish I had one artifact that can prove that there were people here prior to Columbus or the Vikings. Well, like they say, what you wish you can get. With this book here and this information we found, we started studying this tomb known as Burroughs Cave. I was able to look at the ancient language and work at it and stab at it a little bit here and there. Got all my language library together, and I was able to decipher the inscriptions on the stones. And it floored me. I was like, this is just unbelievable. That the tomb of Alexander the Great and the Ptolemies is in south central Illinois. But I was always an open-minded person. I said, okay, there is a possibility because you can load somebody on a ship and sail across the ocean and dump it somewhere. That's a possibility. It's not like they had to go up to the moon or anything. Well, ancient people had that capability. That's fine. Then, the first thing we had to do is, we had to get every single piece of ancient history that is in print. All ancient authors, and we couldn't leave anyone out. So Harry, what does he do? He doesn't get the books that I need. He decides to get the whole library. So here we get hundreds of ancient books here, and he starts reading a book a night, just skimming through, looking for information. And surprisingly, we have found information in there going back. The first mystery I had is, after I discovered that it was Alexander the Great and the Ptolemies, I had a problem. There was a king that was an adult here that built his tomb with the initials of HL for the son Helios. I said, his name is Helios. Who is that? Well, we had to look through ancient history, and we found that it was the son of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, known as Alexander Helios. He was the young sun king, and his sister was Cleopatra Selene, the moon. He disappeared from ancient history at the age of 8. There's absolutely no account giving his presence after the age of 8 to 10, give or take a couple years. Ancient dates are not exactly accurate, really. But he disappeared as a child. And here we find him in Illinois as an adult, depicted in various different uniforms and costumes, worshipped as a god, builds this huge tomb, and here lies, with the description of Russell Burroughs Cave, at the inside of the cave, the golden casket, this mummified body inside with this Greek shield and all that. There was only one person it was Alexander the Great. And here we found the missing Alexander Helios as the builder and transporter of this whole mausoleum. And then it made sense. Looking at the currents, the whole fleet sailed from southern Spain or North Africa, Morocco, Cadiz, just followed the winds that took them right into the Caribbean. They may have stopped on one of the islands of Cuba or somewhere in the Caribbean, and all they did is it led them right to the mouth of the Mississippi River. They explored upwards and got there. Very simple. So then it all started making sense. And we went through trying to locate the tomb, actually, which we've been doing now for 3 years. We had a nightmare because of Russell Burroughs, who looted it. He's trying to stop us, and we will eventually get in. But this is one of the main things that we've discovered. Also, we looked through ancient history. Is there a single clue at all that indicates that they were brought over here? And after a lot of research, we did find it. And I will reveal that in the workshop because it goes into a lot of detail. The problem was that a lot of ancient classical writers had to be careful of what they wrote. They had a system as oppressive as ours today. The Roman emperors were very oppressive. They had their writers to record history, but they wanted them to record it what was politically correct. Same thing happened back then. Except you had leaders back then that were a little more admirable than we have today. At least there was a king out there who went out in the battlefield and hacked up his enemies, and if he died, he died. At least, you know, if a soldier died, he had some cause to die for. His leader was worthwhile, which we don't have today, but they were very oppressive back then too. And this brings me, with all this history and everything that we studied, brings me to one thing. Strange things started coming up. UFO stones, reptilians. I was like, oh no. The scholars are not going to go for that. But I don't care. I present what it says. We searched through ancient history, and we also found evidence about that. And then I got interested in what your community is interested in. I started listening to several tapes about ancient history as far as aliens are concerned. And I said, well, let's take a look at the aliens, the Syrians, the Orions, the reptilians, because obviously to me, after all studying everything, there always was a guiding force through history manipulating everything. It was obvious to me that that happened. Then I said, well, what do the ancients say? When I listened to Robert Morningsky talking about reptilians and giving the names, what the Egyptians called them, I was very impressed with his linguistics because I looked in the hieroglyphics dictionary and there they were. Names for reptilians, names for Syrians, everything. Everything he said you could find in a Sumerian or Egyptian dictionary. And then it started to make sense of our Earth history, how manipulated it was. And I found the proof in ancient history, and it really is sad what has been going on, but I think our people now are waking up. I would like to show a comparison right now that there has been a system controlling all of history and manipulating history, but there have been a few people that have emerged in history that have tried to change things. One of them was Akhenaten in ancient Egypt. He lived around 1350 BC. And what I noticed the similarity is he opposed the priesthoods that were taking and raping the country, and he decided to get rid of all of them and have basically everything come to him in one way, but the people have more. Forget all the priests of all the gods. Get rid of them, give more to the people, and enlighten them with a new philosophy, which was a monotheistic philosophy. Well, that didn't work out. He died very quickly. After he was deposed, they went back to the priesthood, so obviously there was a priesthood controlling everything in Egypt. The same thing you see in civilized Greece. The Greek states were very civilized. They had an advanced culture, but they were constantly fighting one another. They were constantly fighting one another, and the person that changed it and brought order to it was Alexander the Great. Now, the ancients say that he was of divine origin, and I believe it because of his exploits. He was very different from other people. He was out to unite the world. He wanted to stop the fighting amongst his people. And when he went out to conquer the Persian Empire, he had one goal. He was not going to conquer to destroy, but he was going to conquer because he wanted to acquire the knowledge of everybody, all the people that he encountered. He fought some very decisive battles at great odds, but he was a very gracious conqueror. When King Darius III was assassinated by one of his satraps, that was the worst thing that Alexander the Great experienced. He did not, and the satrap said, well, like any other slime bag would say, well, we killed him to satisfy you. He's like, you didn't have a right to do that. This man, only a king can kill a king, and he had no intentions of doing that. And what he did as he conquered the empire is he went farther to India, and when he got into a battle with King Porus, he defeated him, and he told King Porus, You keep your kingdom. I just like a good battle, and I like to gain the knowledge of your people. And what he wanted to do is he wanted to unite all the knowledge. Study everybody, everybody be a brotherhood. Well, he died at a very young age, 32. I suspect he was poisoned, because as soon as he died, his rival generals started fighting and all the killing continued. His half-brother Ptolemy, Soter I, carried on in his spirit when he created the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt. He is commemorated mainly for creating the Library of Alexandria in the spirit of Alexander, to gather the knowledge of the known world and to store it for the public to see. It was available to everybody who was literate. It was a very great achievement of mankind. That ended, unfortunately, when the last of the Ptolemies, Queen Cleopatra, succumbed to the Roman Empire through the Roman civil wars. But it is obvious that there were people back then that were very concerned, including Queen Cleopatra, to preserve that knowledge. They suspected possibly that the Roman tyrant Augustus and the following Roman empires, they had a very decadent governmental system. It was very strong at that point, but it was doomed to failure. They had the same system, a Congress, a Senate, and a leader, similar to what we have today. And there was no longer a royalty. There was a lot of pride in having a royal family back then. People had at least a king to look up as a representative of the gods. They had that. They had somebody to look up to. When the Roman Republic originally had very good values too, but then it got completely corrupted, and there was also, the corruption was actually the beginning of the fall of the Roman Empire. It seemed like it was also manipulated by secret societies back then. But what the Egyptians did at that time is, they said, we don't want this knowledge to go away. We're not going to take any chances. So what it looks like they did is they brought their entire knowledge over here to North America and deposited in this tomb that we're looking at. There are valuable scrolls in there that can give us the entire ancient history. They did that. It was excellent that they did that, because even though the Library of Alexandria survived for a few centuries, it ended up getting completely destroyed, first by Christians, and then later on, after it was transported to Baghdad, the Mongols destroyed the last vestiges in the old 1200s, so a lot of knowledge was lost. But we believe the majority of the knowledge of the Library of Alexandria is still in this cave, and it will be a great blessing to get a hold of it, because the truth about ancient history and everything will be revealed to the public, which I'm very happy to do. And it's also very sad, with all the other lectures, what I've been hearing earlier, what has been going on to our country. It has been going on throughout the world for centuries and thousands of years, I believe. We're being manipulated by different alien races. But I have one thing to say. We here are waking up. We are seeing that we're being manipulated, and we're not going to be manipulated anymore. The most powerful weapon that we have here is knowledge and truth. And the enemy will collapse with that over a period of time. And I have another statement to make. We may have people here that are going to be oppressed by what they've been saying. We may have CIA agents and FBI agents here right now that are scoping everybody out and saying, well, we may have to do something about somebody here. But I have one thing to say to them. Come to my workshop, because you will get your first true education of some truth. Another thing for you. Look who you're serving. You guys are tough guys. You've been trained, you're intelligent. But I can't see anybody, especially me as a historian. I read about Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, great generals that men died for. These men were the first to charge into battle and to risk their lives. I would be proud to serve a person like that. He's the first to go out to battle, to risk his life, and to accomplish something. But you people are serving a bunch of disgusting pedophiles in a shadow government that do not show themselves. Follow them if they are the first to go out into battle. You have killed so many people. My whole family and my family fortune in Europe was destroyed by your damn world wars, your revolutions, and everything. You've destroyed everything. But you can't take the knowledge and the truth that we're coming out with away from us. You may take our land, you may take our homes, but you can't do that. And I ask you, join us. Stop serving these pedophiles. Join us. We welcome you. We know you're intelligent, but join us because the truth is a lot nicer than the falsehoods that you've been taught. And I offer you this for everybody, and including especially FBI and CIA agents. Come to the workshop. You are going to get an education that will, when you go back to your employers, you may think twice about what you're doing. And you may decide to just twist the system. Now, I hope you do that. Truth is very powerful. And I also noticed a few things. They may be planning, this New World Order may be planning warfare. They may be planning bacteria and all that. I personally think they're not going to do it. I don't think they have the guts to do it. They may all be in the plans. I've heard about all the tanks out there. Nobody is attacked yet because there's something going on that is keeping them from executing their plans. It's always getting foiled up. Something's always going wrong. They haven't done anything yet. All they can do is oppress us, try to feed us the garbage that they give in the news and all that. That's stuff they've been doing for thousands of years. They've been oppressing, suppressing information. It's nothing new to me because I know how to look through all that. None of that will work for me. And if all you people come to the workshop, you're going to see the fraud that has been committed in history, how you have all been deceived over the centuries. And it will give you a new perspective how to view new information. And I'm also going to be revealing one of the greatest hoaxes in history that may upset a lot of you people because it has a lot to do with religion and belief. But I will document everything, what has happened, and what's happening right now to our people and everybody, that we have been lied to. We have been lied to the whole time. Our schools, our universities are lying to us. If any of you have small children, educate them yourself and give them homeschooling because they're just going to get filtered with garbage in school. Do we have like 3 or 4 minutes or something? You can ask a question or two. 3 minutes.
How would you say that your work collaborates with Sitchin's work, his ancient works with the Sumerians?
Zachariah Sitchin. Oh, how does my work correlate with Zachariah Sitchin, and what do I think about it? Personally, Zachariah Sitchin presents some very good data. He gives the Sumerian, Akkadian inscriptions, and he does tell you about the wars of the gods of the Terra Papers, as they were called, the planet. That is all correct, because that's what I got too. The problem is that what he tries to do is, he is a Jew by religion. What he does is he twists a lot of his information to fit with his Judaistic beliefs, and that's where he goes off stray. If he had just stuck to what the ancient inscriptions say without going back to the Talmud or the Kabbalah or anything which is of medieval origin extraction, then he would do fine. That's the only thing. He's fine on his ancient tablets, and the whole idea of the Earth Chronicles and the Wars of the Gods, that is correct. If that's what your main concern is, that is all correct.
Paul, we talked yesterday, but I'll also like to just ask you to maybe talk a little bit about how the Great Conspiracy and the things that have been happening for thousands of years also relate to demonic presence and how the Satanism and the people in power and their Satanist beliefs deal with, I mean, how do you explain that?
Well,
through your research.
How do I explain Satanism and demonic powers? and how they influence our government and for thousands of years what's been going on. Well, I'm not one to say good guys and bad guys. Now, there's a lot of metaphysical to say the positive and the negative. I can kind of agree with that. I just think that there are many forces affecting our planet, and we are the prize. Mankind is the prize. And there's one group that's controlling our governments, and there's other groups controlling other governments, and they've just been fighting one another, and we're just basically the guinea pigs in the bait. So I think this whole concept is satanic. And the way I feel is, if there is an alien presence here that's been manipulating us for thousands of years, I feel this way: we should wake up and tell them to get out and leave us alone, because this is our planet.
What do you feel about the aliens on the walls, the Greys, their position back then?
The Greys, you find them in the Egyptian hieroglyphic dictionary, and if some of you have heard Robert Morningsky, he gives an excellent analysis about the Greys, and I've done the research myself, and I come up to the same conclusion. In Egyptian, the Greys are known by a word called the Shetu. In Egyptian hieroglyphs, it will show you the glyph that pronounces Shetu, and it's a little snake-like reptilian next to it, denoting a reptile or snake. As the definition of Shetu is, it's a small creature from the 7th star of Orion. That you will find in an Egyptian hieroglyphic dictionary. The verb Shetu means to abduct, to take away, to seize. In Egyptian legends, the Shetu were fine stonecutters and stonemasons. They had the freedom to do whatever they wished to manipulate mankind. From that, stonemasons and free, you get the old concept of the Freemasons, which are behind the power today. And the Greys still seem to be behind all the power today, so that's where I see a connection between the Greys and the Freemasons and all the secret societies that have been manipulating the world. And surprisingly, you find it in the Egyptian dictionary. That was a shock to me. Well, I guess time's up, so I enjoyed talking to you, and I'm really enjoying this conference, so thank you very much.